You're listening to IOE Insights, the UCL Institute of Education podcast at University College London.
Hi, and welcome to part of our series on anti-Black racism, being curated by the Equality, Inclusion and Diversity Group for CPA. So my name is Alison Wiggins. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the subject lead for the PGCE Social Sciences at IOE. I am also an anti-racist educator. I'm a secondary school teacher, and I'm in the middle of my doctorate in education. And I'm really pleased to have my two guests with me here. So I'd like to welcome Kate Williams. Please introduce yourself, Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Williams. I'm a teacher also. I'm here today because I'm Ruby's mum, but I'm also doing the same course as Alison, so I'm doing my doctorate as well. And the topic is Afro hair discrimination.
Thank you so much, Kate, and welcome, Ruby. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi. I'm here because I got told my hair was too big. I've just graduated from Manchester and I've just started my graduate job.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time. So we're going to spend some time together kind of talking about the specific form of anti-Black racism that you have experienced specifically and as a family. That's kind of part of the doctorate work that I do. It's part of my role as a teacher educator to make sure that the student teachers who are going into the profession fully understand the responsibilities that they have around anti-racism and addressing all issues of discrimination in a way that is confident and well-informed. But it's also Black History Month. So happy Black History Month to everybody who's listening and to both of you. So what have you done or what might you do for Black History Month? Bearing in mind we recognise Black history is 365 days a year. But in this month we usually get more of an opportunity to celebrate and learn about it. So Kate, can I start with you?
So I was fortunate to teach a lesson about Benjamin, Zephaniah and Bob Marley together. So I got to use the word overstand in a lesson, which was great.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much. And what about you, Ruby?
I've been trying to be kind of selective with the things I choose to do, just because it is difficult to sometimes tell my story, bring up old thoughts, but I'm doing this interview and I've just been helping to amplify other voices and working with the Halo Collective.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. And something that I've done is, as you have, Ruby, has been quite selective about the things that I engage with. But I've also handed the responsibility for the Black History Month over to people who are not racialised as Black, because it's everybody's history. So what I'm trying to do is empower people who don't usually get the chance to organise things like this to actually be part of the organisation. And that's actually been really, really successful. So we're going to go to the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton on a trip with my group. And they've also found some Black art exhibitions that we're going to engage with, which is brilliant. So kind of leading from that question, my next question to both of you is, why do you think it's important that we celebrate Black History Month? And what do you think schools should be doing to celebrate this year's theme, which is reclaiming narratives?
Like you said earlier, Black history is all of our history, and it's something that should be all year round. So it should be spread across the curriculum in different ways. But unfortunately, the way the national curriculum is, the pressure that we're under as teachers, it becomes very heavy about literacy and numeracy, and we're focused on the core topics. So Black History Month for me gives a sort of explicit time frame in the academic year where a lot of schools do something at least. And so I think that's why it's important. Until it is embedded, for me, we need to keep it there. And hopefully one day we won't need it there. I think it's important that schools focus on the positives of the narratives.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ruby. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the time it can be quite virtue signalling, look what we're doing, look what we're doing. But I think it, as my mum said, at the moment, there isn't enough throughout the year. So it is important that we do have the time dedicated to, even if it's not necessarily something big being done, at least there is something being done within the schools, because children deserve to feel celebrated. They deserve to have that time to know that they can be proud and reclaim their own stories, narratives, reclaim their parents, their grandparents' narratives. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that schools try and have positive narratives around Black history. So as you said earlier, it should be embedded throughout the curriculum, throughout the academic year, but we all know that doesn't happen. Schools it's busy. There's lots of demands on teachers' time, and unfortunately, sometimes the subjects which aren't core subjects can slip into the background. So I think Black History Month is an explicit time where teachers can celebrate if they have Black or mixed race pupils in their class. Even if they don't, they can learn about people such as Benjamin Zephaniah, who died last year. They can use his poetry with the children in the class. And I think until we can honestly say that Black history, which is all of our history, is across the year and across the curriculum, we need to keep Black History Month in place.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree with you. Until we don't need it anymore, we need it. And it's the same for all awareness months. So if we think about Women's History Month and LGBTQIA Awareness Month and Pride Month, until we don't need those awareness days, we have to use them and harness the power that they have to kind of uncover and enable people to recognise the interconnectedness of all of our histories, which is unfortunately obscured in lots of the national curriculum. So, thank you so much for that. So, Ruby, I'm going to come to you now. And can you talk to us a little bit about your experiences of racialised discrimination while you were in school?
Yeah, I mean, if I tell the whole story, we'll be here all day. But when I was 14, I went into school with my afro out, as I did many times throughout my my time at school. I went in with my afro out and was approached and told that my hair was getting a bit too big and I would need to do something about it because it wasn't compliant with the uniform policy. I went home, told my parents. They were like, what? Obviously, it must be like a weird little joke. Obviously doesn't realise that it's offensive. Went in the next day with my afro out, as I usually did, and was told, no, you're breaking the uniform policy. If you do this again, you will be sent home. And that was like the start of a 2-year being at the school battle, but then onwards up until I was 18, it was going on legally, behind the scenes, in the school. If I would go in, sometimes with my hair in like a big bun, I'd be told, maybe a bit too big today, maybe breaking the rules. I would have a teacher pull me out of a classroom to take me and tell me, I think it's getting a bit too big, let's do something about it. I once had a teacher that took me into a PE changing room and actually like physically tried to wrap my bun to make it smaller in the guise of helping me to make sure I didn't get in trouble, which I was 14, and this was a teacher I'd known since I was like 11 years old, so I very much trusted her, and she was a Black woman, and I thought, oh, she just doesn't want me to get in trouble. But as soon as she told my mum was like, how many white kids' hairs have you had your hands in today? Like, this is out of order. And it just went on for a long time at school, ruined my confidence in myself, ruined my opinion on school. I didn't want to go in anymore. I had really bad anxiety. I'd have panic attacks because I would walk into school and have a teacher waiting, most of the time, one specific teacher waiting at the door for me to walk in to basically judge whether I was allowed to learn that day. And it would be a public thing. Everybody would be aware, oh, Ruby's hair's a bit big today, she's going to get in trouble. And it shattered my confidence in myself, and I just didn't want to go in anymore.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And Kate, I know how hard it must be. And Kate, I now want you to tell us how you felt and reacted when all of this was going on with Ruby.
Even after however many years, it's still really hard to hear you say the story. I think first shock, as I said earlier, I'm a teacher myself. I trained to be a teacher here at the IOE, and I did a module called Wider Context in Primary Education. I don't know if that's still going on the PGCE. And I was trained that you need to look at a child as a whole person, and you need to look at your class as a collection of individuals. I've raised my children in Hackney. I'm from the north of England myself, where it wasn't a very diverse area, but Hackney, is a very diverse area. And I suppose I was very naive that I knew I'd have to prepare Ruby and her brother for racism, like when we went back up to visit people where I'm from. But I didn't think I would have to prepare them for it in a school in Hackney. And maybe I didn't enough. I don't know. It was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? I think we weren't expecting it. How did I feel? Angry. angry. I think the thing that sort of really stuck out for me, which still burns when I think about it, was when Ruby talked about the fact that there was a white girl sitting next to her with her hair down to her hips, which when she was leaning down, her hair was flopping, going onto Ruby as our hair moves around. But Ruby's hair was literally no bigger than yours is right now. I mean, this is a really good visual representation. We don't need to use that picture of you. We've got, Ruby's hair was literally like yours, maybe with less movement. And it felt that the fact they wanted her to put her hair away, for me, it felt very dehumanising.
Absolutely.
One of the words used a lot was distracting. It could make contact with other children. It can block their view of the whiteboard. And like 5'4", I'd be sitting behind boys that just had their growth spurts and just hit 6 foot. And like, we just had to work around it. But for some reason, my hair that grew out of my head the way it was, like, they just couldn't seem to get their head around the fact that that's how it looked. And I was once told I wouldn't care if your hair was blue as long as you made it a bit smaller. And it's like, how can it be okay for me to chemically alter my hair but not wear it the way it naturally grows out of my head?
And I think that's the thing. I think the school itself, it wasn't a strict school. It wasn't a school that we'd had to fight to get into. It wasn't a school with a waiting list, or it was, a run-of-the-mill, normal Hackney school. And the fact that they would let blue hair, they'd let any other style. Their only other policy was about children with fringes, making sure that a fringe didn't go in your eye. And that was the only other policy, so the children could wear their hair however they liked. But it was just this weird thing about Afro hair, and they actually put that in the policy as well. They actually specified Afro hair in the policy, which is...
Afro-style hair, including buns, must be of reasonable size and length.
So, and that's why it was such a strong legal case, and that's why the Equality and Human Rights Commission wanted to push Ruby's case forward once the school didn't cooperate, because it's such a clear-cut case that having it in the public eye will educate other schools, and hopefully these trainee teachers that are going to see this video, that to make a child feel less than other children, to make a child feel that she no longer belongs somewhere, that she's been for 3 years. I wanted her to move schools. When it was made clear to me in the beginning, I'm going to say it, the head teacher is not going to change his mind. When that was made clear to me, I was like, let's just move schools. This is not going to end pretty. But Ruby was adamant that she didn't want to move schools because she had all her friends there. It was a feeder school from her primary school. We're local. We've lived there literally her entire life. So it was a feeder school. So she had people in her year group who she'd been in primary school with, who she'd been in nursery school with, actually. Why should she have to change school? And you know what it's like once you're in secondary school, it's like you're this school, you're that school. To go from being a 14-year-old from this school to suddenly being a 14-year-old in a neighbouring school would be very difficult, and you didn't want to do it, did you?
No.
But she also didn't want to go to school.
Yeah, and nor should she. And it's actually really, really hard for me to hear. Ruby, I've followed your story since it happened, not because we share ethnicity and hair texture, but also because I was absolutely astonished that the same thing was happening to you as happened to me and a lot of the kind of generation of black mixed women who I went to school with. And because of your case, I've done some research in uniform policy and about the ways that uniform policy literally contravenes the law, and how it works really against the people it's supposed to serve. Schools are there for the purpose of educating children, and there is zero correlation. There's no evidence whatsoever that uniform and the way that you have or don't have your hair has any correlation with learning or outcomes whatsoever. So when these decisions are made, it feels like they're being made because of something else, right? And the research that I've done has shown that when a child doesn't feel like they belong to the school community, that has more of an impact on their well-being, on their attainment, on their achievement, and on their ability to be able to navigate, the rest of their lives. At that point, Ruby was a child, and her safety and well-being should have been the thing that was focused on. and it wasn't.
I think that's what was really hard,
yeah.
because we even had, as Ruby described, her mental health declined very rapidly and very suddenly, actually. And the GP was actually writing to the school and saying, please stop. You know, this child is depressed, they have anxiety because of your school policy. Please stop. And to me, the fact that that's not enough to make a school stop is just incredible. I don't think I'll ever get over the actual arrogance of an organisation that can keep a policy in place, even though they have psychologists, GPs, MPs, local politicians, the DFE, the diocese, the parent, the young person, children charity, Just for Kids Law, even though they have the Ofsted, social services. Like literally, when I think about how many people got involved in Ruby's case before it got to court, just to walk alongside us as a family, but we're writing to the school, we're communicating with the school, was explaining exactly what you just said, that this is illegal. But they, as Lenny would say, your dad, they were wrong and strong. They dug their heels in very, very hard.
And that is what we're going to kind of talk about next. So, as I say, I've followed your case the whole time, tried my best to support you, and I've used this as a catalyst for change. So, Ruby, you're actually named in my proposal for my doctorate, because the purpose of my doctorate is to make sure no one ever experiences what you did. And my doctorate is focused specifically on Black girls in school and their experiences, because those intersectional experiences are absent from a lot of literature and invisibilised by school cultures and school policy specifically. So it's really important to me that, and I know it's really important to you as well, that what happened to you, first of all, is never repeated, but secondly, is a point at which, for me, this is a turning point in British schools. This case and your experience has to change things profoundly moving forward. And it's my job as a teacher educator to make sure that everybody I work with has a level of awareness that will mean that is unthinkable in the future. And that is absolutely what I'm working for. That's the rage that kind of propels me forward in the work that I do, which is why I'm so happy that you're here to talk about it and that our student teachers will have the opportunity to hear it actually from you. So basically now we kind of want to know what happened next. So we know that you stayed in the school. So Ruby, if I come to you, what happened after all of these people got involved and your case was, I guess, started?
Okay, so I think what happened next was probably what had more of an impact on me emotionally as well, because one of the big parts of my case was not only the policy and how it damaged me, but was actually the victimization and harassment that I then faced in school as a result of legally challenging the discrimination that I was facing. So something as simple as us saying this policy is wrong, we're going to challenge it, then led to me being treated completely differently. I had my yearbook picture, I still remember the day like vividly. I was in parents' evening as normal. We'd seen a teacher who was really outraged about what was happening because she was my maths teacher, and she'd literally said, the amount of school you're missing is making you fall behind and you're like one of the top of the class, you shouldn't be behind. So it was already a difficult parents' evening from hearing this, from hearing teachers saying that my absences had been impacting my learning when I'd normally never really had anything negative said about me at a parents' evening. And then one of my friends comes to me, because this is in year 11, we're getting our yearbooks, and says, oh, Ruby, have you seen your picture in the yearbook? And I said, no, I haven't. And we went and looked. And so when the last picture that they had of me in school, so I had my year 7 picture, which was when I was 11 years old, first in the school, like first day, I had my hair straightened, like literally was a baby. And then the next picture that I had was I think it was my year 9, year 9 photo when I had my afro out. And that was the picture that had always been used on the digital registers. And like, if they ever printed out pictures of us in the classroom, that was always the picture that was used. And I opened up the yearbook, and out of these 2 pictures that they had, because I had missed the year 11 photo day, instead of using the most recent picture they had of me,
Or
which was-
taking a new picture, which they had
or
for
even
others.
letting me know that they could take a new picture which they had, they put that picture of me at 11 years old in the yearbook. So all my friends in their yearbook photos are 16 years old. They all get to look back and remember how they looked in that final year. But when I look in that yearbook, I see myself at 11 with straightened hair, and literally it's just because they didn't want to put the picture of me with my afro in. And that was just one, that was just like one example. Like I asked the teacher a teacher had asked me, are you going to be trying to become a prefect? And I said, well, why was there a picture of me in year 7 in the yearbook? She said, oh, well, that wasn't my decision. You know, that wasn't my decision. Like it became really difficult because I would kind of have teachers whispering in my ear, like, I don't agree with what's happening to you. I don't think this is right. This isn't good. It wasn't my decision, but none of them were doing anything. None of them would say it out loud. They would say it to me or they would say it to my mum, but none of them were doing anything. And I know that they didn't necessarily have too much power to, but what would have been nice for me to see was them defending me and trying to protect me. And one of the worst things that happened during the case was, I think, was it in the days after the papers had been sent?
So that first incident was after the first initial legal letters from the legal solicitors.
And
then that one was in May. So the first sort of pre-court letter, it's called, went to the school. And then that was when the yearbook thing happened. And then the school literally ignored every letter for months. So the solicitor was sending it recorded delivery, and they just never responded ever. And the only option for Ruby in the end was to actually take it to court. There was nothing else to do. They were served with court papers, and 2 days later.
So my history teacher used to put pictures of us up on the wall, like for good homework. It was a thing that she'd done like since we were in year 9 or something. And within the week, so it would go up on a Monday and then it would stay up until the next week when the next homework had been given in. And my picture was up there. And then the next day I had my like French GCSE, so I was like kind of practicing in the back of the classroom. So I hadn't been paying attention. And at lunchtime, one of my friends came to me and said, Ruby, did you notice that your picture wasn't there anymore? That your picture wasn't on the thing? And I said, oh, no, I didn't notice. The next day I went and looked. At the end, I waited till the end of the lesson and I went up to the front and I said, Miss, why is my picture not there? And she said, oh, I was told to take it down because, and like signalled to the side of her head for an afro. And that was literally like the moment that everything was just, it all snapped for me.
You'd held it together till then?
Yeah, like I'd followed the rule, I'd gone in with my hair tied up. I'd been like biting my tongue with all these little things happening. And even when I was doing that, I was still being punished just because I was legally challenging it. I wasn't even doing anything in the school. Like I wouldn't even talk about it to anyone. No one knew that the legal thing had happened.
We weren't allowed to, were we?
Yeah, we weren't allowed to discuss it. But just because I'd taken this action, even though they gave me no choice because they ignored everything, I'd taken this action, and the retaliation of the head teacher was to walk into my classroom and order my teacher to take a picture of me off the wall. And so I took my hair out of the ponytail that day and refused to tie it back up. And basically that was right at the start of my GCSEs. So then I was refused entry to the school other than for my exams because I was refusing to tie my hair up. They wouldn't let me into any of the revision sessions. During one of my GCSE exams, there were 2 senior leadership team members standing outside the door for like the end 20 minutes of my exam. So I'm there doing my GCSE, and in the corner of my eye, I can see 2 teachers in the window standing there waiting for me to tell me that I would have to either tie my hair up or leave. And I still did decently well in my GCSEs, but I was predicted to like, I think it was like all 9s.
Yeah, I think that's sort of one of the interesting aspects, I think, of Ruby's story and why it has to change things as well is they didn't know who she was. They didn't know who she was walking down the corridor. They didn't know that she was one of their star pupils who was in the gifted and talented and this, that and the other. And the point is it shouldn't matter who she was. But what it did was her intelligence safeguarded her failure. But my concern is that an average child who's kind of just doing all right and just going to make their GCSEs, which is the middle children, because the way our education system is set up, we're always going to have children who are missing the mark. We're always going to have the middle children, and we're always going to have the children who get the nines. This damage could happen to Ruby, and she survived it academically purely because of her intelligence. But other children don't survive it. Other children end up out of school. Other children end up with no GCSEs or going to a PRU and getting 3 GCSEs simply because of their hair. We know a young person that happened to, who ended up in a PRU because of her hair.
Yeah, I wasn't the first person it happened to at my school. I was just the first person.
We didn't know about it, did we?
I was told that by the head teacher. You're not the first person that I've told about this rule. You're just the first person who refuses to follow it.
There's so much here, and I really hope that the teachers, the experienced teachers and the new teachers in the audience are listening to this and recognising, because I feel like what's coming out of this is an adultification bias for you. You were a child and you were being brought into adult matters, like a court case when you were a child, and rather than protect you and support you, your teachers were actively working against what it is that they are, what is their core purpose, and their core purpose is the safeguarding and education of you as a child, and you were not being treated as a child, and you were forced to navigate all of this while you were trying to prepare for your GCSEs. And to me, it doesn't matter how often I read it or how now I've heard it from your mouth, it doesn't in any way cease to shock me, because it literally goes against everything that I, and I'm sure you, Kate, went into teaching for. So I really just want people to pay attention to this and to recognise this is not a one-off case, and that what it needs to take is for adults and educators to stand with the children who are being treated like this for things to change. Everybody just knowing that it's wrong and saying nothing changes nothing. It's not good enough for you to ignore harm that's being done. For me, it's violence that's being done to a child in your remit, in your sphere of influence, in your school, and no one should be okay with that.
It felt like violence, and I think Ruby, as she's told me off for, now she's an adult, Ruby had a very sheltered life. So she wasn't a young person that had lots of sleepovers, or, she wasn't out on the streets or anything like that. I am quite a overprotective parent. So she'd had quite a sheltered life. And all of a sudden, one of the days when she was sent home, the second day she was sent home, they actually, mobile phones were banned in the school, so she didn't have her phone on her. She'd gone to school. This was actually the day that picture that all the papers use was taken. She was sent home from school, but they actually refused to let the receptionist call me.
Yeah, I walked in to the school through the main entrance and was told by the head teacher that I needed to leave. So I went into the reception, just as my mum had told me to do, because we knew it would happen, because this was the second day in a row. And I went into the reception and said, I've been sent home, can you please call my mum or my dad, whichever one you can get through to. And I was sat in the reception area waiting. And as everybody had gone into their classrooms, the head teacher was then kind of making his way back to his office and saw me sat in the reception and came into the reception to basically ask me, what are you still doing here? I've told you to leave. And I said, I'm waiting for them to call my mum. And he said, no, your mum knows that you're going to be sent home. She doesn't need to be called. She knew when she sent you like this.
And he stood there with an open the door.
Yeah.
For Ruby to walk out into the street in E9 at 9:10 in the morning or whatever it was, without us knowing that she wasn't safely in school. And I just, as a parent and as a teacher, I just think that's astonishing. And I reported it to Hackney as a safeguarding issue. It's obviously she can come home at 3:30 or when we're expecting her, but you do not expect your child to walk out at 9:10. They knew nothing about her. She came home, upset. Her dad was there to greet her. What if we were both out? What if she didn't have keys? What if she had nowhere to go? No money, no food, no phone? And I just find it astonishing that could happen, really.
I'm not the only child he did that to. He actually did it to a little boy who ended up going missing for a couple of days. And I'm not the only one that he's sent home without contacting their parents. Ofsted actually raised Ruby's situation, not that
particular situation, but just her decline in mental health as a safeguarding concern. And they went to Hackney Social Services and highlighted Ruby as a child at risk. This was after Just for Kids Law had contacted Ofsted to tell them what was going on. And Social Services rang the school to see if she was okay. So the people who were actually abusing her, as far as I'm concerned, it was abuse of power. The people who were abusing her were the people reassuring Social Services that she was okay. No one actually rang me or asked to speak to Ruby. What's happening to you? What, you know? And I mean, like I said, she was saved by her own resilience. I don't like that word, but that's what she was saved by. She was saved by having a supportive family. But she should never have been put in that position in the first place. And neither should any other child, which is why we'll keep going until, with you as well and with everybody else, it cannot be that an innocent child, a minor, goes somewhere that they have no choice about. It's not like a job. We have a choice about where we work. And if something happens at work, you can quit and go somewhere else. Education is compulsory. Look, they're fining parents left, right and centre, aren't they? It can't be that they go through the school gates and face this kind of abuse. Yeah,
well, the responsibility of teachers is to be their parent while they're in their care.
Loco parentis.
And there's no way that those teachers acted in that way. And anything could have happened. This is what my mum used to say to me all the time. Anything can happen to you when you're on that road, anything. And literally anything could have happened to you as a child at 9:30 in the morning, wherever you were. And the school would have been responsible for that. And thank God nothing did happen to you. But that should have never even been a possibility. Like, I find it, it fills me with rage.
Actually,
it really does.
After about 20 minutes, a member of staff from the school, I won't say who, actually rang me in secret from her own mobile. I was like, Kate, I'm not allowed to ring you, but I just need you to know that Ruby's been sent home. And put her job, her livelihood on the line because she was concerned about Ruby's welfare. By then, she'd actually already got home. But
nobody knew that.
But nobody knew that. Nobody knew that. And, we don't live, nowhere's safe, but we definitely don't live in a particularly safe area. It's sort of a big, massive estate on either side, really, isn't it? I still get cross when I think about
I'm
that.
raging right now. I can feel my face going red. So now we know what happened. Now I really want to focus on, Ruby, thinking about what do you hope these experiences, they have changed things in schools, we know that, but what do you hope for the future in terms of the ways in which your case and what happened to you and what you've done subsequently is going to change in schools?
I very much like what you said earlier. I just don't want any other child to have to experience this, and that's been my main goal ever since we decided to share the story, because it was always known that there were going to be people who said, well, why wouldn't you just follow the policy? Schools have rules. In my day, we would have all had to do this, and you just wanted money, attention, things like that. And I never did. I hated the attention that I got at school for the whole experience. Like, I hated all the oohs and ahs I would get when a teacher would come in and say, Ruby, like, can we speak to you? I hated it. I didn't want to have to speak out about the story. I didn't want to have my name out there known for this. I frankly have not had a great time having it out there, because I was called unemployable and told that I'd never find a job because of challenging this rule. But the only thing that makes it worth it is knowing that I can save other children from experiencing it.
We're really interested to know what has happened since and what changes have occurred in the school and in the school context as a result of Ruby's case.
So once it had gone to court, as everyone knows, takes a long time. So it was a very drawn-out process in court. Eventually, Ruby was, again, people don't know this part, Ruby was actually given a judgment in default or something like that it's called, which is if you ignore court proceedings, then it will just automatically go in the other person's favour after a certain number of months. So because the school unbelievably ignored court proceedings for 9 months, I think it was. The judge eventually found in Ruby's favour. But then the school had the opportunity to appeal that. So then they answered. After all those years, they answered to appeal the judgment that had gone in Ruby's favour. So it was due to go to court for the judge to decide whether or not the judgment would hold or not hold. And 2 days before it was to go to court, the governing body of the school, offered a settlement to Ruby, a financial settlement, which they wouldn't be admitting legal liability. But the way it was explained to us by the legal team is that because there was money involved, in terms of the public sphere, which is what we're interested in, we weren't interested in making legal precedents. In terms of the public sphere, people will see it that Ruby's won because she's won the compensation. She didn't win, it was settled. But the fact they gave her money, people draw their own conclusions from that.
And still never had an apology or any...
Well, so then no apology. We were waiting then to do the media coverage with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, but the school were actually blocking it somehow. I'm not sure how, because we were kept out of those communications. But it was delayed. So I think the settlement was in October, November, December. Ruby was getting more and more frustrated because she was still being silenced. And then in January, she said to me, if we don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. I don't want this to follow me to university. I don't want to be at university and the story's going to come out. So I asked permission from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission to do the press ourselves. So they couldn't do it because of legal reasons. So we did it ourselves. We found our own journalist and contacted them, gave them the exclusive. And then at no point did we expect it to blow up the way it did we?
No, didn't really want it to.
No. I think, and at that point, once the stories started coming out, that was when the school opened up and were forced to change their hair policy. So up until that point, they were still keeping the same hair policy. But at
one point, they changed it to hair must not be of excessive volume.
Yes, they changed the word. They took the word afro out.
Because it was direct discrimination, so they just made it indirect instead.
They actually won an Equalities Award in 2017. And my son came home innocently saying, we had an assembly today because we won an Equalities Award. And this is the thing, it's even impacted him because I literally just started crying in rage. I was like, what do you mean they've won an Equalities Award? And his face, he looked like, what have I said wrong? Why is mum crying? I was so furious because this was when they still had the original wording. So on my way to work the next day, I found out who this Equality Award was. And I rang them up and I said, did you actually read this school's hair policy before you gave them this Equality Award? And they put me in touch with the director of the award. And we had an email back and forth and I sent her a screenshot of the hair policy on the website and said, your award is meaningless. If you can give it to a school that actually is doing this to a child, it's meaningless. And that same day, the whole uniform policy came off the website. And then when it went back up, it had slightly different wording. Yeah. But
the core of it was still the same.
Yeah, the core of it.
That was 2017 and I left the school in 2018 and they were still doing it all.
Right, and the point is that there's not another group of people that this applies to.
Yeah.
It's only people who look like us, only us who are melanated, only us who have afro texture.
That was one of his arguments, is that he'd once sent home an Irish child that had an afro. And that was one of his arguments, is, like...
He didn't send him home, he just asked him to cut it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But, that was one of his arguments, is, like all the white footballers in the 70s that had afros, and it's because they had perms. And that was one of his arguments was, no, it's not just because you're black, it's that you have afro hair. Like, make it smaller. Have you ever heard of chemical relaxers? I've been looking on blackhair.com. Yeah, he was very...
There's something about that makes everything worse. The idea that you can't even differentiate between somebody who has a perm, which is a choice, and somebody who has afro-textured hair, which is exactly the way that it grows out of their head. And the idea that you're so out of touch with reality.
And biology.
And genetics and awareness and perceptions of race.
The first meeting we had, myself and Ruby's dad, because at that time I was so angry, we invited our pastor along to kind of just sort of keep me calm and keep Lenny calm, but we didn't know Lenny needed to be kept calm until we were in the room. And he's a mixed race guy, and he came along. And when the head teacher was saying about white people having afro and he was speaking back to him and he said, can I just ask you what you mean by that? And, and then that was when he said about Kevin Keegan having an afro. And then my pastor explained to him, he said, I'm mixed race. He is the pastor. And I have 2 daughters. One has the same hair texture as Ruby, and one has like soft, curly, ringly hair. This daughter would be able to come to your school as she is. This daughter would have to alter herself to just try and get him to understand how ludicrous it really is. But he didn't want to understand. Some people don't want to understand, is the truth. So they forced the school to change the policy. The Equality and Human Rights Commission helped write it, the new one that's still there, although I haven't checked recently, I'll have to check. It was a legally binding agreement. So if they did it to another child, the family wouldn't need to take them to court. They would just automatically be breaking the law. But then the whole point of the case was for it to spill out into other schools. We did the press ourselves, not the Equality and Human Rights Commission. But since then, Ruby's been involved in their press releases, and we were involved in the writing of their guidance. We were involved in writing Hackney guidance first, weren't we?
Yeah.
And the NEU, we were involved in their racial, what's it called?
The anti-racist
Yes,
framework.
the anti-racist thing. We were involved in the launch of that. I think that was the first thing you did, wasn't it? But yeah, a lot of things, the guidance now exists. So the guidance was written by the Equality and Human Rights Commission with the help of lots of different organisations. World Afro Day were involved. Were the Halo Collective involved in that? No, but Enact were, weren't they? So lots of different people involved, including us. It's there, but it's not statutory educational law. So it's there as guidance, but schools can and do never pick it up, never read it.
Yeah. Well, this is what we're hoping to change, right? We've got to raise awareness. We've got to make sure the next generation of educators have an understanding of how central this is to their responsibility as an adult and somebody who is responsible for the learning and education of young people and the well-being and safety of those young people. So Ruby, can you tell me a little bit about what you hope moving forward, what you've experienced and all of the work that you've done with different organisations is going to do to change things?
The main goal is just to protect future generations from even ever having to think about this happening. Like, I look at my niece and I want her to be able to wear her hair however she wants and not even think that it would be an issue. She always says, I want to wear my hair like my Auntie Ruby. And I love that she sees it as a positive, and that's how I want children to be able to see it. And I want there to be changes for children, but also for adults, because as much as education was compulsory and work isn't necessarily, we also shouldn't have to walk into a workplace and think I need to alter myself just to get by. There's obviously this is one of the arguments we had in the school, is that I understand for science and PE, I understand if there's a reason why I need to do it for safety, but there's no reason why any other time I should be having to do this. And so with the Halo Collective, we focus on adopting the code, which is the Halo Code, which schools and workplaces can adopt and basically put into their policy, which is them pledging to not commit hair discrimination, to not do this to any children. So we have Adopt the Code, we have Slay the Stigma, which is focusing on the stigma of Afro hair in society, looking at destigmatizing it and normalizing it for everyone. And then we also have Fix the Law, which is to look at things like the education law not being statutory. We want to be able to make sure that if any school or any workplace or any institution is doing this, that it's automatically legal. It's not just a suggestion that it could be illegal. We want it to be known that this is wrong and you will face consequences for it. And so that's what I'm doing within the Halo Collective. Outside of it, just very much I like to work alongside anyone who's pushing to try and save anyone from experiencing this, and that's my main focus. I helped Dove with their Crown Toolkit, which is a workshop that schools can use. Actually, like, they've basically done all the work for them. It's like a lesson that you can do for your children with different exercises and activities to talk about hair discrimination in a nice, light-hearted way for young children. It was a part of their... What was it called?
I can't remember. It was a few years ago now.
It's like a part of their... helping children with their
self-esteem.
Self-esteem,
yeah.
It's a part of their self-esteem project was because
behind the filter.
Behind the filter.
Yeah.
So a part of their, because they've got the Crown Act in the US, they were looking at what they can do here. So the Crown Toolkit was a nice idea to basically give schools something they can work with. And Halo's also very active in schools with doing different workshops sometimes. It's just difficult because most of us are volunteers.
And your work with World Afro Day as well, the judge thing you did.
Yeah, that was a long time ago now. But yeah, World Afro Day, we did a competition like for children to do modelling. So we picked 10 winners and they got to do a photo shoot with Black Beauty magazine. And it was just a really lovely day, like having them all so excited and all the different clothes that they were wearing, having their hair in all these different hairstyles. And I was doing their makeup and they were all just so happy to be there and really excited at the celebration, which goes back to what we were saying before, that they should be able to celebrate themselves. They shouldn't have to be justifying their own existence.
And World Afro Day is something that schools can do as well.
Absolutely.
On the 15th of September, just to sort of have that day, that, do something different with your hair. Let's celebrate all the different ways that Afro hair can be worn.
Yeah. Amazing. So, Kate, we're just going to come to you now. What do you hope, can you tell us a little bit about your research and what do you hope that is going to change?
So, as you can tell, it's still a very upsetting experience for both of us. I could have gone into debt and gone into therapy, but I decided to go into debt and do a doctorate instead. So here I am. I want to make sure that parents and pupils have a voice about this topic in educational research. So there's bits of work that's been done in sociology, history, law, but there isn't really research about hair policies in the education discipline. And it's not really something that people talk about. So I decided to research it. So I'm doing the EdD like yourself. So it's sort of, you progress along a few years. So I'm sort of at the halfway mark now. So I've interviewed parents firstly, and now I've interviewed pupils as well, just about their experiences really, just to give them a voice, which will then hopefully do what you're trying to do with this, which is to educate the educators. So if they realise, what my hope is when educators realise, I had one little boy, when I asked him, how did you feel? So his first day of year 7, he was put in isolation for having plaits. And I went back, kind of asked him, I said, so do you remember how you felt when you were in the isolation room? How did you feel? In the isolation booth. So we're talking about an 11-year-old baby, his first day of school, excited. I think how excited my kids were their first day of secondary school. Excited.
The pictures in my yearbook, if you need to remember.
Going in. And then he was put in isolation and put in an isolation booth, staring at a brick wall. And I asked him how he felt, and his words will haunt me for the rest of my life. He said he felt heartbroken because he knew that any teacher walking past the isolation room would look at him and think, what has he done on the first day of school to deserve this? He must be a really naughty boy. We have to watch this one. And just listening to him, that conversation was enough for me to know that all the hard work, all the late nights, all the frustration when I'm got a deadline is worth it, because we can't have babies, 11-year-olds, going to secondary school and having their souls destroyed and being told that they're not good enough to be educated anymore. He had paperwork for from his Spanish teacher. It was his first ever Spanish lesson. So he'd never spoken Spanish in his life, and he was faced with this paper of Spanish work to do with no help at all. And you just think, whoever thought that was a good idea? So yeah, I think there were three children I spoke to where it was a year 7 situation. One was actually year 6. It was on his transition day. he'd gone to his transition day, and then his mum got a phone call, before September you need to cut his hair. And they spent the whole summer fighting that. And they didn't know until the day before he was due to start school whether they would let him in the school or not.
And did they?
They did, but it was an exception. They had to kind of get reports involved. They had to kind of sort of, not mental health, but almost like
Prove that he's
prove
allowed to have hair.
why it would be so detrimental to him specifically to have his hair cut. But all the other boys had to have their hair cut. So now he's the only one who looks like him. He's the only one that looks like that. And all the other boys have had their hair cut. So he still doesn't belong, does he?
Yeah, absolutely.
He still doesn't belong.
And our hair is so much a part of our identity. And it's something that I think maybe some people just don't realise that there is a history, there is a culture, there is a process, there are practices and rituals and things that are so implicit in the culture and in our identity that has to do with our hair. So when you ask us to change it, it's not just you're asking us to change our hair, you're asking us to change exactly who we are to conform to a set of standards that we've got no hope of meeting. So even if you were to straighten your hair, you're still never going to feel like you entirely belong, same as me.
Yeah. If
and
it rains, you look like a different person.
Right, yeah.
In this country, well, it's going to rain.
So I think the stories that you tell and the humanization of those stories is so, so powerful. And educators need to know, they need to understand, and they need to be the ones that speak up about this. It can't be left to parents and children themselves to help adults to understand why this is fundamentally wrong and goes against everything we should be doing as educators in school. Schools should work for the benefit of the children that are in the school. And that's the bottom line. There's nothing else. I don't want to hear any more arguments about that. Like, if you're there to serve. If you're a teacher and you're an educator, you're there to serve the children who the parents have put in your care, and there should be no questions around that. And if you're doing something that is harming that child, whatever you're doing absolutely needs to stop. So that's one of my messages to educators. I want to hear your message to educators. What do you think that they need to know? What would you tell them?
I think the main thing is just to, like you said, to protect the children. And if something seems wrong, it probably is. And it shouldn't have to be, like, I wish that it wasn't a situation that that person that called you was putting their job on the line. I wish it wasn't that. But when children are involved, I feel like you have to. Like, you shouldn't just be staying quiet or whispering in the child's ear that something's wrong. If you know that a child is being harmed, you should be stepping up, whether that's in secret, whether that's actually standing up and fighting against something. You should be protecting the children, because it's not fair that, like, I shouldn't have had to fight my own battle in the school. I shouldn't have been getting bullied by a grown man walking around the halls. I should have been able to walk into school and not be worried that I would literally be pointed at and screamed at for having my hair out. That shouldn't have happened. And so teachers should have been able to say to him, what are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And Kate,
And he should have listened.
Yeah, you should have. What would your message to our future educators?
I came across a phrase recently, which you probably know, cultural humility. And I think for me that really sits well with this topic, because even me, as a white parent of mixed race children, every day is a learning day in terms of the fact that my children are racialised differently to me. And I think that the arrogance that some white people have, that I've read one book, so now I understand Afro hair, or I've read one book, so now I understand slavery. No, it doesn't work like that. You know, every single child is a unique individual. So you might have met, because that's what people say, oh, but black parents want their kids to have their hair in this way. Well, that family might, but that family doesn't. So you need to take each family as they are, and you need to not sort of group a whole section of society together just because they happen to share certain DNA or whatever, you know? I think humility, cultural humility, to sort of accept the fact that I will never, I will never understand or overstand what it is to walk down the street as a mixed race black woman in this country, or as my husband, as a black Rasta man in this country, or my son as a mixed race young man in this country, I will never understand what that is. And that's okay, because I'm here to support them in that, and I think it's the arrogance that gets me. It's the arrogance of white educators who think, well, our policy's fair because it applies to everybody. But everybody's hair's not the same. So, okay, you don't want white kids to come to school with a complete skinhead. Okay, I don't really see why that's a problem, but fine. But actually, a black boy having a low haircut is exactly the way his dad has got his hair and the way Barack Obama had his hair. And so many of the men that they maybe aspire to. That boy that was put in isolation in year 7, look at Lewis Hamilton's hair. Look how he's celebrating his culture, and he's got his hair in lovely cane rows a lot of the time. Yet this 11-year-old was put in, almost like a cell for having the same hair as Lewis Hamilton, who I'm sure he's been knighted now, hasn't he? So things like that, I think, as educators, we are forced, and I remember this from my PGCE days, you're forced to kind of fake it till you make it. You're forced to become a bit arrogant. You're forced to pretend you understand things that you don't necessarily understand. Phonics, I do understand it now. But, you're forced to kind of run before you can walk. That's the nature of our job. And it almost feels like survival of the fittest. So the ones who fall over, the ones that don't make it as teachers. So the ones who make it as teachers are often the ones that can blag it a bit and kind of, multitask. But actually that's really dangerous, because what that means is you miss massive chunks of knowledge, and you're pretending to understand things that you don't. So once you've established yourself as a teacher, find your humility again. Find your humility again and let the children teach you, because they will. If you see a way your hair is and you think, oh, that's not appropriate for school, just ask yourself, why do I think that?
Absolutely.
Why do I think it's not appropriate?
Yeah, and I think this all kind of ties into culturally responsive pedagogies and the idea that, as I say, I'm going to keep saying it, that we're there to serve the children. They're not there to serve us. And it's our responsibility to know and understand them. And if we don't know and understand them, we need to model good learning and go and do that work and find out about it. Kind of regardless of your own race or experience, you don't have to have experienced something to make the effort to understand and have a level of awareness about that. And that all does come down to humility. So I've really appreciated your time, your energy, you sharing your stories. And we have to hope that collectively, the work that we're doing, and I do have hope, I do believe that if you don't have hope, you can't be a teacher. If you can't believe that things can be different and things can be better, you've got no place in this job. And I am forever hopeful that we are going to move forward more positively and that all of this will not have been for nothing. Things have changed, things will change, and hopefully this will be part of that. So we really appreciate your time today. And my last question to both of you is, what is the best thing that you have seen, read or listened to recently that you could recommend to me and to the rest of our audience? And I'll start with you, Kate.
Okay, I'm going to be really cool. At the moment, I'm rewatching Schitt's Creek because
Okay.
it's hilarious. So it becomes interesting. You've already seen it, but yeah, I think everything feels very serious in my life a lot of the time. So I think I just want something frivolous to watch of an evening that I don't have to concentrate on, and that's just a bit funny.
Yeah, amazing. And what about you, Ruby?
I've been really enjoying all the interviews from the people that were in Love Island USA this season.
Okay.
There was a group of 3 women that became really close friends in there that have become a really big thing, and everybody's talking about their friendship and talking about the centering of female friendships and how important that was in the season. And especially the winning couple were a black couple, the winning couple of Love Island UK this year were a black couple. So there's been a lot of conversations, and one of my favourite interviews was of Serena, who won this season's Love Island USA, in the Sacred Salon, which is Beyonce's hairline salon. And she was talking about her reasoning for choosing braids when she went into Love Island. And I think it was just nice to be able to hear all of this, because when I was younger watching Love Island, I wouldn't have had really any representation on there. So it's nice hearing someone talk about the reason why she chose to do boho braids is because she knew that being in there for all those weeks, she'd be able to maintain it and keep it looking nice and know that she would feel comfortable with it. And seeing her do the other black people on there's hair throughout the show, I think it was really nice to see.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening. Search IOE Insights for more podcasts from the IOE.